The phone call came in at 11:47 p.m. The voice on the other end sounded calm, almost too calm, as Rachel Whitmore reported her husband, David Mercer, missing. But investigators would soon uncover a devastating truth. David wasn't just missing, he was dead. And the person who had just called the police was the very one who had ended his life. This is the chilling case of a decorated Green Beret, a $1 million Utah home, and a marriage that appeared perfect, until the night it all came crashing down. Stay with me as we unravel the lies, the secret affair, the shocking confession, and the meticulous cover-up that turned this missing person case into one of Utah's most disturbing murders. On the surface, David Mercer and Rachel Whitmore were the kind of couple everyone admired. They lived in a spacious, $1 million home nestled in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, a quiet, upscale community framed by the Wasatch Mountains. Two neighbors, they were the model family, three bright children, ages 11, 7, and 5, running through the yard in the summer, holiday lights glowing on their house each winter, and barbecues that brought the neighborhood together. David, at 51, was no ordinary father. He was a decorated Green Beret with the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group. Friends and fellow soldiers said he was brilliant and reliable, the kind of man you could trust with your life. He had served his country with distinction for over a decade, deployed multiple times, and carried himself with the quiet discipline of someone used to leading others through chaos. Rachel, 42, was the picture of the devoted military wife. She stayed home to raise their children, managed the household during David's long trainings and deployments, and was described by neighbors as polite, a little shy, but always involved in her kids' activities. To those looking in from the outside, she was a loving mother and a steadfast partner. The Mercer family appeared to have it all: financial stability, a beautiful home, 3 healthy children, and a marriage built on trust and shared purpose. But behind those closed doors, cracks had already begun to form. Small arguments were becoming big ones. What once looked like teamwork was turning into tension, and by mid-2024, those cracks were no longer just visible, they were threatening to tear the whole family apart. By the summer of 2024, the perfect picture of the Mercer family had started to blur. Friends began to notice the tension, the way David and Rachel spoke to each other, short and sharp. Arguments that once stayed private started spilling into public moments. The couple, who had once seemed so solid, now looked like two people simply trying to endure each other. In August 2024, things escalated. Rachel went to court and filed for a temporary protective order, claiming she needed protection from David. The accusation shocked everyone who knew him. This was a man who had dedicated his life to protecting others. But when the case went before Commissioner Alan Reeves, the evidence told a very different story. The videos Rachel submitted as proof didn't show fear. They showed confrontation, two people shouting at each other, Rachel just as aggressive as David. Text messages painted an even clearer picture, Rachel repeatedly berating and belittling David, insulting him, trying to provoke him. Commissioner Reeves made his decision. He dismissed the protective order, and in his ruling, he wrote something that now seems almost prophetic. The conduct of the parties over the past several months is representative of a highly dysfunctional marriage, bringing out the worst in both parties. Divorce proceedings should have been filed long before reaching this point. But Rachel wasn't planning a divorce. She was planning something far more final. In the weeks that followed, David's friends began to notice subtle changes in him. He was quieter, more withdrawn, and he stopped sleeping at home regularly, choosing instead to stay at the National Guard facility, a decision he confided was for his own safety. To those who knew him best, David seemed to be preparing himself emotionally for a breakup. He even told his longtime friend Kevin Harlow that he was ready to move on. He said it was time to end the marriage, Kevin later recalled. He was ready to take the next step and finally file for divorce. But David would never get the chance to do that. By September 2024, the Mercer household was no longer a home, it was a pressure cooker. David was exhausted from the constant conflict. Rachel's behavior had become unpredictable, almost erratic. Friends noticed she seemed distracted, emotionally volatile, and consumed by something she wasn't talking about. What David didn't know, at least not at first, was that Rachel was living a double life. For months, she had been involved with another man. And this wasn't just a passing fling, it was an intense, all-consuming affair. Friends would later say that Rachel seemed more alive, more reckless, as if she had already chosen a future that didn't include her husband. As the weeks ticked down to September 20th, David's behavior shifted. He stopped staying at home altogether, sleeping most nights at the Utah National Guard facility. Those close to him said he felt unsafe, like a man who could sense something was coming. In one of his final conversations with longtime friend Kevin Harlow, David admitted he was ready to file for divorce. "He told me, 'It's time. I can't live like this anymore,'" Kevin said later. He just wanted to move on with his life. But Rachel wasn't thinking about divorce, she was planning a very different ending. On September 19, 2024, just 2 days before the murder, Rachel met with her lover. During their time together, she casually showed him something chilling, a loaded Glock 19X pistol that she kept in the house. At the time, he probably didn't think much of it. Many military families own firearms. But prosecutors would later reveal that this moment, Rachel displaying the gun, was part of her preparation. She was setting the stage, mentally rehearsing for what she was about to do. And as September 20th dawned, the tension between Rachel and David reached its breaking point. David came home that evening, and witnesses would later report hearing a heated argument between the couple. Shouting, slamming doors, years of anger and betrayal boiling over into one final confrontation. That night, Rachel made a decision that would change everything. Divorce would no longer be necessary. There would be no custody battle, no court hearings, no financial negotiations. Because by the end of that night, Rachel had decided David Mercer would not live to see another day. September 20th, 2024. What began as an ordinary Friday would end as the most tragic night the Mercer family had ever seen. As evening settled over Cottonwood Heights, David returned to the house. By now, he had discovered the truth: Rachel was having an affair. The confrontation that followed was loud and intense. Neighbors would later recall hearing shouting through the walls, the kind of raw argument that made it clear this was no ordinary fight. Years of frustration, anger, and betrayal all erupted in one night. But eventually, the yelling stopped. The house went quiet. The children were staying with Rachel's parents that night, leaving just the two of them inside that big, empty home. David, exhausted from the argument, eventually went to bed in the master bedroom, the same bedroom where he had slept for over a decade, the room where his children had often come running in during thunderstorms, the room that had been a place of safety. And then, sometime after midnight, Rachel acted. She went to the place where the Glock 19X was kept, took it in her hands, and walked toward the bedroom. David was asleep, completely unaware of the danger, completely vulnerable. According to Rachel's later confession, she stood there, gun in hand, and pulled the trigger. The shot struck David in the head. In an instant, a husband, a father, a soldier who had survived deployments overseas was gone, killed not on a battlefield, but in his own bed. What followed was cold, methodical, and horrifying. Rachel dragged David's body into a rooftop storage container. She maneuvered it down the stairs, loaded it into the family minivan, and smashed his phone to make sure no one could trace his last movements. She then drove his truck several blocks away, abandoning it to make it look like he had simply gone out and disappeared. But Rachel's night was far from over. She drove north with David's body in the van, traveling under the cover of darkness. Hours later, she stopped in a remote area and buried him in a shallow grave, a place that remains unknown to this day. When she finally returned home, she didn't collapse in grief. She got to work. Rachel bleached the walls and floors, scrubbed the carpet, and began cleaning every trace of what had happened. 2 days later, she would order a brand new mattress to replace the blood-soaked one where David had been killed. By the time the sun rose over Cottonwood Heights, Rachel's plan was already in motion. She had eliminated her husband, and now she was covering her tracks. The day after the murder, Rachel's behavior took an even darker turn. On September 22, 2024, she drove to her lover's house. Her children were still staying with her parents. The house, now eerily spotless, was empty, but the weight of what she had done followed her. When she sat down with him, she didn't cry. She didn't act afraid. Instead, she confessed. She told him everything. How she had waited until David was asleep. How she had pulled the trigger. How she had moved the body, buried him, and cleaned the crime scene. When he noticed bruises on her arms and legs and asked where they came from, Rachel's answer was chilling. She said she had gotten them while burying her husband's body and scrubbing the house clean. The man was horrified. The woman he thought he knew had just admitted to murder with almost casual detachment. But what happened next sealed Rachel's fate. During their next phone conversation, her lover secretly hit record. He wanted proof, not just for himself, but in case he ever needed to turn it over to authorities. What Rachel said on that call would later become one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in the entire case. "Wow, if you think I could even hurt a fly." He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't David. Her tone was cold, detached, as if she had stripped away every trace of humanity from the man she once promised to love and protect. She even told her lover not to think of her as a monster, reminding him of who she was before she opened her mouth. But for investigators, these recordings were gold. They revealed not just what Rachel had done, but how she felt about it, with chilling indifference. And most disturbingly, these conversations happened before Rachel ever reported David missing. Before anyone else even knew he was gone, she was already speaking of him in the past tense. 6 days after the murder, Rachel finally made the call to police. It was September 28, 2024. She told officers that David had said he would be gone for a week and asked her not to contact him. Her tone was calm, controlled, almost too controlled for a woman reporting her husband missing. But even before Rachel picked up the phone, the Utah National Guard had already grown concerned. David was a man who prided himself on reliability. When he failed to report for duty on September 23rd, alarm bells went off. The Guard contacted police and launched their own internal search. Detectives quickly realized something was wrong. David's truck was found abandoned just a few blocks from the Mercer home. There was no sign of forced entry, no sign of robbery, and no activity on his bank accounts. Then came the breakthrough. Rachel's lover, now terrified by what he knew, came forward. He handed investigators screenshots of their text messages and the secretly recorded phone calls. The evidence was damning. Rachel had admitted to the murder in her own words. Armed with this information, police obtained a search warrant for the Mercer home. What they found inside told a story far different from the one Rachel had been telling. In the master bedroom, investigators discovered a large blood stain beneath the bed, hidden under the new mattress. Blood spatter was found on the bed frame slats, and reddish-brown spots dotted the walls and blinds. The house reeked of bleach, a sign that someone had attempted to scrub the crime scene. Most telling of all, the mattress was brand new. Phone records revealed Rachel had ordered it on September 24th, just 3 days after the murder, and had it delivered 2 days later. Investigators also pulled GPS data from Rachel's phone. It showed her traveling to the location where David's truck was abandoned around 6 a.m. on September 21st, and then heading north toward Davis County, exactly where she later admitted to burying his body. With physical evidence, digital evidence, and a recorded confession in hand, police were ready to make their move. On October 2, 2024, Cottonwood Heights police arrested Rachel Whitmore on charges of first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. But the investigation was far from over. Detectives suspected Rachel hadn't acted alone, at least not in the cleanup that followed. When police started piecing together Rachel's timeline, one detail stood out. Her parents, Thomas and Elaine Whitmore, had been at her house shortly after David's disappearance. At first, Thomas and Elaine told investigators they were only there briefly, just to pick up clothing for the kids. But phone records and surveillance footage painted a different picture. The couple had spent over 5 hours at Rachel's home in the days following the murder, and their actions during that time raised serious red flags. Investigators discovered that Elaine had purchased the brand new mattress that replaced the blood-soaked one. Her phone had been remotely reset, conveniently erasing all data about her location and activity during those crucial days. When detectives pressed Thomas about what he saw in the house, he slipped up. "I didn't go into where the incident happened," he said, inadvertently confirming that he knew exactly where the crime had taken place. Search warrants were soon executed at the Whitmore home. Inside, police found something disturbing: a Glock 19X gun box, wrapped in a child's onesie and hidden in a plastic storage tote near Rachel's bedroom. It matched the description of the gun Rachel had shown her lover just days before the murder. To investigators, it was clear Rachel's parents had helped her cover her tracks. On October 24, 2024, Thomas and Elaine Whitmore were arrested and charged with 4 counts of obstruction of justice each. The arrest shocked the community. Not only was a mother accused of murdering her husband, but now her parents were accused of helping to clean up the crime scene. The case had become bigger than anyone had imagined, a web of lies that stretched across 3 generations. Months have passed since Rachel's arrest, but the most crucial piece of the puzzle is still missing: David Mercer's body. Despite extensive searches, David has yet to be found. Law enforcement, volunteers, And even David's fellow Green Berets have scoured northern Utah for months, covering areas from Davis and Weber counties all the way to Box Elder County near the Utah-Idaho border. Over 70 searches have participated in these efforts, combing through fields, using cadaver dogs, and scanning rural backroads, all in the hope of bringing David home. His longtime friend, Kevin Harlow, admits it haunts them. "The fact that the search is now in its 5th month keeps us up at night," he said. "We can't rest until we find him." Prosecutors have revealed additional physical evidence in court. One of the most chilling discoveries was a vehicle storage container found floating in water, and inside, traces of David's blood. It confirmed what investigators already knew. David had been moved, hidden, and likely buried far from home. Meanwhile, Rachel remains behind bars at the Salt Lake County Jail, denied bail after prosecutors argued she posed a significant risk to the community. They revealed that she had once told her lover she would rather shoot herself than go to prison, proof, they said, of her desperation and potential for further violence. Rachel now faces an overwhelming list of charges. First-degree murder, 5 counts of obstruction of justice, abuse or desecration of a human body, tampering with a witness, possession of a controlled substance. Her trial is scheduled to begin on December 8, 2025, and is expected to last 8 days. The courtroom will likely be filled with family, friends, and members of the community, all waiting for answers and justice. But perhaps the most heartbreaking element of this case is the Mercer children. 3 young lives, forever changed. They have effectively lost both parents, one to murder, one to prison. The Mercer family released a statement through their victim representative. "We are hopeful that we will find David soon, or that Rachel or someone will come forward with the location of his body so we can properly lay him to rest." And then there is the looming question of David's $500,000 life insurance policy. With Rachel listed as the beneficiary, the insurance company has asked the court to determine who should receive the money. As we wait for the trial to begin, one question haunts everyone who hears this story. How does a mother of 3 justify destroying so many lives for the sake of an affair? Justice may one day be served, but David Mercer will never come home to tuck in his children or watch them grow. And somewhere in northern Utah, a father, a soldier, and a friend lies in an unmarked grave, waiting for someone to finally reveal the truth. And that is the heartbreaking story of David Mercer, a father, a husband, and a soldier whose life was cut short not by war, but by the person he trusted most. Rachel Whitmore's trial is set for December 2025, and many hope it will finally deliver justice. But until David's body is found, there can be no true closure for his children, his friends, or his fellow soldiers still searching for him. Cases like this remind us that even behind the walls of the most beautiful homes, darkness can grow unchecked. If you found this case as shocking as we did, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Do you think Rachel will ever reveal where David is buried? We'd love to hear your take. And as always, thank you for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next case.